a grim start in year 2 as viewership craters. Damn. Unrivaled, the nascent 3-on-3 Women's Basketball League is off to a shaky start in its second year. The league, which has a slated goal of providing elite women's basketball players an alternative.
Unrivaled was supposed to be the domestic alternative to playing overseas, but the numbers you just heard are not a mistake. The 3-on-3 league that promised to transform women's basketball is losing viewers at an alarming pace. We're talking about drops as steep as 75% in certain time slots, from 175,000 on opening night to just 71,000 by the second weekend, for a league backed by TNT and featuring some of the biggest names in the sport. Those are disastrous figures. But the real intrigue isn't only the poor ratings. It's that this situation represents a clash between 3 competing futures for women's basketball. Unrivaled wants to keep players in the US during the off-season. Project B is teasing international tournaments and bigger paydays, and the WNBA itself is now pushing the most aggressive expansion plan in its history.
According to a report by Front Office Sports on Wednesday, Unrivaled's opening slate of games on January 5th averaged just 175,000 viewers across TNT and truTV. 2 additional games on opening day that only aired on truTV averaged 32,000 viewers. From there, the numbers have...
To really understand how bad this is, let's put it into perspective. The best product on the court. That's what Unrivaled CEO Alex Bazell told Front Office Sports when he was asked about the league's disastrous ratings. Meanwhile, social media is flooded with clips of the mist and breeze combining to shoot 1 for 26 from beyond the arc. There are blooper reels of players tripping over each other and technical failures with microphones in the middle of games. And this is year 2. Remember, this was supposed to be the season where Unrivaled finally proved the concept worked. Instead, they're getting absolutely destroyed by TGL, the golf league. Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy hitting golf balls indoors are pulling in 3 to 4 times the audience of Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier playing basketball. Let that sink in.
Let's go to the part we all want to know. Quote, "We're building Unrivaled for the long game, and we're confident in our outlook, keeping in mind the same core principles and goals we set forth when establishing the league," Unrivaled CEO Alex Bazell told Front Office Sports. "We're proud of the product we're putting on the court each week and are going to continue growing our audience while showcasing the best women's basketball players in the world."
Now here's where the harsh business truth hits. Unrivaled signed a 6-year broadcast deal with TNT, but it includes a way out. TNT can walk away after 3 years if the league never builds momentum. We're only in year 2, and the league isn't just failing to grow. It's actually sliding backward, and the timing couldn't be worse. Warner Bros. Discovery, TNT's parent company, is currently tangled in a messy sale process. Netflix and Paramount are both circling, trying to buy the company. When new owners take over, they will scrutinize every asset and ask one simple question: is this making money or bleeding money?
The breeze and the mist when it combined 1 for 26 from the 3-point line. I'm looking on Twitter and I'm seeing bloopers of these. They're still falling all over each other. We're still doing.
Here's the thing about Netflix that most people don't realize. They love prestige content. They want shows that spark conversation, trend online, and generate awards buzz. Even if the audience is small, Unrivaled fits that profile perfectly. It's progressive, female-focused, and has big names attached. Netflix would absolutely put it behind their paywall and market it as part of their sports expansion. But Paramount is a different story. Paramount is in cost-cutting mode. They're looking to cut expenses, not by a vanity project that draws 70,000 viewers. If Paramount wins the bidding war for Warner Bros. Discovery, Unrivaled is probably dead. That opt-out clause gets triggered, and suddenly these players are scrambling to find somewhere else to play in the offseason.
Paramount will probably get Unrivaled the bleep out of here. I gotta be honest. Paramount would most likely get Unrivaled the bleep out of here. Netflix, on the other hand, they'd probably like a message like Unrivaled to be.
Which brings us to Project B. And this is where things get truly intriguing because Project B could be the most questionable venture in professional sports right now. They revealed a handful of players back in December, then vanished for weeks. Then, out of nowhere, they dropped their Tokyo tournament dates, March 26th through April 4th. No venue announcement, no TV partner, no ticket info, just dates. The whole thing smells like a money laundering scheme pretending to be a sports league. Think about it. Who sets tournament dates before sharing basic logistics? Who promises to pay top-tier athletes without proving they have the setup to actually host games?
Tells me that Project B is not going to be getting the top players. Just, if there is a Project B, just something tells me the top, I don't know. It just reeks of scam to me. It reeks of, let me just wash some money off real quick. Just reeks of, let me just launder a couple, it just reeks to me. If it comes out and it's a real thing, I'll believe it. But as of right now, I'm taking everything Project B comes out with a grain of salt. Everything Project B announces, I'm taking with a grain of salt. So is it going to conflict with proposed start date? Yeah, I guess.
But let's assume for a second that Project B is real. Let's assume they actually intend to run these tournaments and compensate the athletes. Even then, they face a huge issue. Those Tokyo dates they just released, March 26th through April 4th, clash directly with the WNBA's proposed revised calendar. Sources close to the current CBA talks say the WNBA wants training camp to begin as early as mid-March. The league is aiming to increase the schedule from 44 games to somewhere between 50 and 54. And if you're adding 10 extra games while also cutting down on back-to-back matchups, the math is obvious. You need more days. The season has to begin earlier and finish later. Right now, under the existing CBA, training camp started April 27th last season. That timeline gave players competing overseas enough time to complete their international seasons and return to the US. But if training camp shifts to mid-March, that creates an immediate conflict.
The tournament stop will start March 26th and end April 4th. The 5-on-5 league is planning a global series of tournaments in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. It's likely that the Tokyo stop will be one of the league's last before players return to the WNBA. Let me say this actually as a side note. Let's say there is a Project B. Nothing would make me happier than the WNBA owner saying, oh yeah, you're in Project B. You can't come over here late. You can play in Project B, but you're going to be here for the start.
And this is exactly where the WNBA owners have to draw a line. They need to set real boundaries instead of letting players control the entire schedule. Here's how it should work. If you decide to play in Project B, that's your choice. But you don't get to roll into WNBA training camp 3 weeks late because your Tokyo tournament ran over. You wait, just like every other player who competes overseas and has to join their team mid-season. The WNBA already has a grace period system for international commitments. If you're playing in Europe or Asia and your season extends past the WNBA start date, you're allowed to join late, but there are consequences. You miss games. You lose valuable practice time. And you don't receive special treatment just because you're a star.
The league and WNBA Players Association are currently in a stalemate in discussions for a new collective bargaining agreement. The union is still waiting for a response to a proposal they submitted close to Christmas, according to sources familiar with negotiation. Whoa. The union is still waiting for a response.
Now let's get into what the players are actually demanding in these CBA talks, because this is where the disconnect becomes crystal clear. The WNBA Players Association submitted a proposal right before Christmas. They're asking for a $10.5 million salary cap and about 30% of the league's gross revenue. Those are huge jumps compared to the current system. And look, I'm not saying the players don't deserve better pay, but you can't demand NBA-level salaries while also insisting on the option to miss the first month of the season because you're playing in a side league that might not even be real.
Loony. That proposal's not happening. Hey, maybe if I just don't answer this for long enough, maybe they'll just send something a little bit more serious. In that proposal, the players are seeking a $10.5 million salary cap and roughly 30% share of league gross revenue. According to sources familiar with negotiations, the WNBA is proposing an increase from 44 games between 50 to 54 games.
What makes the owners' silence so revealing is the timing. The players submitted that proposal before Christmas, and now we're already deep into January. Yet the league still hasn't replied. Complete radio silence. That's not because the owners are carefully crafting a thoughtful counteroffer. It's because they saw the proposal and thought, this isn't serious. This is so far beyond what's realistic that it doesn't even deserve a response. It's like trying to sell a used car for $10,000 and someone offers you $200. You don't negotiate, you just walk away because that person isn't a real buyer. The owners are waiting for the players to return with something that makes sense. And the longer this drags on, the more power the owners gain, because the current CBA expires soon and the players need a new agreement in place before the season starts. Now, let's tie all of this together, because this is where the story gets truly fascinating. Unrivaled is collapsing under awful ratings, and there's a possible ownership shakeup at Warner Brothers. Discovery got Project B, which might not even be real, announcing tournament dates that directly clash with the WNBA's proposed schedule expansion. And you've got WNBA players demanding record-breaking pay while also trying to keep the option open to play in these rival leagues. Something has to give, because these three visions for the future of women's basketball can't all exist at the same time. If the WNBA shifts to a mid-March start with a 54-game season ending in November, the current overseas model dies. Players won't have time to spend 4 months in Europe or Asia and still make it back for WNBA training camp. The calendar simply won't allow it. And if the WNBA is paying top players between $250,000 and $500,000 per season, the financial incentive to play overseas shrinks dramatically. Why risk injury in Turkey for an extra $100,000 when you're already earning $500,000 at home? That's the WNBA strategy. Lengthen the season, raise salaries, and make it financially unreasonable for players to do anything other than focus on the WNBA. It's a power move wrapped in a player-friendly expansion. But here's the issue. The players want both. They want the longer WNBA season and the bigger paychecks, but they also want the freedom to play in Unrivaled or Project B or anywhere else. They want it all. And the owners are basically saying, choose one. You can either have a longer, more profitable WNBA season that requires your full commitment, or you can keep a shorter season with lower pay that leaves room for side leagues and outside projects. But you can't have both. Just look at what happened with Unrivaled's ratings. The league sold itself as elite women's basketball, yet the on-court product has been messy. Players are visibly worn out. They're playing year-round with no real break, and it shows. Shooting from deep is terrible. Turnovers are constant. The intensity is missing. Now imagine that fatigue spilling over into the WNBA season. Picture Breanna Stewart or Nafisa Collier arriving at training camp in mid-March after playing Unrivaled from January through early March, then trying to maintain that level through November. It's not sustainable. The body needs rest. Elite athletes need an off-season to recover, train properly, and let injuries heal. But the financial pressure to play all year is forcing players to sacrifice long-term health for short-term money. That's why the WNBA's proposal is interesting from a player welfare standpoint. If the league extends the season and raises salaries significantly, it removes that financial pressure. Players could afford to take an actual off-season, rest, recover, and return to training camp fresh and ready to perform at their best. But that requires trust that the WNBA will actually deliver those pay increases, and with the league's history of broken promises and financial instability, that trust simply isn't there yet, which brings us back to that unanswered proposal sitting on the owners' desks. The players asked for 30% of gross revenue and a $10.5 million salary cap. The owners haven't replied, and the clock is ticking. Here's my take on what's actually going on behind closed doors. The owners are waiting to see how the next media rights deal shakes out. The WNBA's current contract with ESPN and CBS is ending soon, and the league is negotiating a new package that could be worth significantly more than the current agreement. If that new deal comes in strong, say $200 million or $300 million annually from broadcast partners, then suddenly a 30% revenue share becomes realistic. The math would work. The owners could pay the players what they're asking for and still turn a profit. But if the media rights deal disappoints and the WNBA only secures a modest increase over the current deal, then the players' proposal is dead on arrival. The money simply isn't there to support those salary demands. So the owners are playing a waiting game, letting the media negotiations play out before committing to any specific salary structure. It's smart business, but it's also incredibly frustrating for players who need to plan their financial future. And this is where Unrivaled's collapse becomes a major problem for the players' negotiating position. One of the arguments they've been making is that they have alternatives. They can play in Unrivaled. They can play in Project B. They can play overseas. They don't need the WNBA as much as the WNBA needs them. But if Unrivaled is pulling 70,000 viewers and facing cancellation after year 3, that argument collapses. If Project B turns out to be a scam that never actually runs a tournament, that argument collapses. If overseas leagues start cutting budgets due to economic pressure, that argument collapses. Suddenly, the WNBA becomes the only game in town. And when you're the only option available, you hold all the leverage. The owners know this. They're watching Unrivaled's ratings crater, and they're viewing Project B's suspicious announcements with skepticism. They're watching overseas leagues struggle financially and thinking, why should we rush to meet the players' demands when their alternatives are disappearing? This is hardball negotiation at its finest, and the players are losing leverage by the day. So what happens next? My prediction: the WNBA announces a new media rights deal within the next 2 months. If that deal is strong, a new CBA will come together quickly, with salaries rising significantly, but the season expanding to 50-plus games and starting earlier. Players will be forced to choose between the WNBA and these side leagues, and most will opt for the WNBA because the pay will finally be worth it. But if the media rights deal disappoints, we're headed for a labor dispute. The players will refuse to accept a CBA that doesn't meet their salary demands, and the owners will refuse to pay salaries that the revenue can't support, which could lead to a delayed season or worse. Either way, Unrivaled is probably finished after year 3. Those ratings aren't sustainable, and TNT will likely trigger the opt-out clause. Project B will either prove itself legitimate or disappear entirely in the next few months, and the WNBA will emerge as the dominant force in women's basketball, whether that's good or bad. The question is whether the league will use that dominance to actually take care of its players or continue underpaying talent while executives and owners pocket the profits. Because if the WNBA eliminates all competition and still refuses to pay players fairly, that tells you everything you need to know about the league's priorities. So here's my question for you. If you were a WNBA player right now, would you accept a longer season with higher pay but no time for side leagues? Or would you hold out for a shorter season that lets you make money elsewhere? Even if those other opportunities are fading, you can't have both. The calendar doesn't work, and the body can't sustain it. Something has to give. Drop your answer in the comments, and if you think I'm missing something in this analysis, tell me where I'm wrong. This story is developing fast, and the next few months will determine the future of women's professional basketball for the next decade. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.